Welcome to the ONS podcast with your host, Linnea Jacobson.
Welcome back, you guys, to our ONS podcast. ONS stands for Office of Neighborhood Safety. I'm your host, Linnea Jacobson, and I'm a member of the ONS team. This podcast was created for departments like us and community organizations to come on and talk about our services. All of our episodes are about connecting you to alternative public safety measures, programs, and your local growth and healing opportunities. Today we have Minnesota Justice Research Center, better known as MNJRC, in the studio. Minnesota Justice Research Center is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that partners with Minnesota's public safety and legal systems on our policies, programs, and strategic plans. They have these teams that come in and look at the work we do and how we're doing it and whether it aligns with justice, accountability, equity, and second chances through rehabilitation. In front of me, I have MNJRC's Executive Director, Justin Terrell. Terrell has a degree in social work and a master's in advocacy and political leadership from Metro State. He started his career serving children and families in crisis situations. In 2012, he became a community organizer and led several successful campaigns on criminal justice issues. He served as the executive director of CMAH, which is the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage, advising the governor and Minnesota legislature on issues impacting Black and African immigrant communities during the pandemic and civil unrest. In addition to being the ED of Minnesota Justice Research Center, Terrell was appointed by the governor to serve on the POST Board, which stands for Peace Officer Standards and Training Board, and is a longtime supporter of Ujamaa Place. Welcome, Justin.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself that I did not mention. So like none of the educational stuff. Just tell us like your background, family.
Yeah, so I'm from South Minneapolis. I'm a South Sider. My family, we actually grew up homeless in the city of Minneapolis. So I stayed at the 410 shelter when I was a kid. So I like to say we kind of experienced the best and the worst that the city has to offer. Grew up in the 90s, so, you know, Murderapolis and all that stuff, which is a story that I'm a lot of friends that I'm talking to right now, so a lot of my peers were kind of reconnecting to that era as we start looking at some of the issues in Minneapolis right now. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't all bad, right? Like the 90s were awesome, hip hop and all that stuff.
Cross colors.
Definitely cross colors and Spike Lee movies. And
you know what? It's so nice to have someone on this show that is around my age so we can like talk about stuff. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, we can get into it. And so I grew up in South Minneapolis, and later on moved back to my neighborhood after college and started working with youth and families. And, you know, it just kind of took me down a path where at one point I ended up in front of a judge and realized that if I ended up in front of a judge and, you know, I went to church twice on Sunday and every Wednesday with my grandma, that some of the cats I grew up with, they ain't really have a chance. And so that started my journey into criminal justice. You know, started looking into organizing, trying to figure out how to make a difference in my community. And it just kind of led me down this path to where I'm at now. And yeah, I'm just dedicated to serving my community.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Do you celebrate the holidays at all?
Like any holidays?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I got some icebreaker questions.
Okay,
and
cool.
I just wanted to check in with you before I got into them. So what is your favorite thing about celebrating the holidays?
Well, let me think. I mean, you know, I'd celebrate the holidays with my family. So if it's Halloween, my favorite thing is the costumes, you know, and we like costumes a lot in the Terrell household. Mm-hmm. So like my favorite year is when we dressed up as the Incredibles. Mm-hmm. And I mentor a young man who's 28 now. I met him when he's 12. He's grown now. Mm-hmm. But he played Frozone in that one. So you know, we got the whole crew together. So that was a fun one. I love Easter and Thanksgiving just because, not necessarily because of history and traditions around those holidays, but because of the food, you know, and the meals. I think it's always good to spend time eating good food with family and friends. So, how
many boys do you have in your house?
So I got 2 little boys, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. It's me, and my wife is outnumbered, but she likes to count our cat Luna. You know, so that's kind of how that plays out.
Did you guys do all the superhero costumes? Did you go through that stage with the kids? Because they're still kind of young, so I'm trying to figure out, are they coming up out of that stage, or were they?
You know, it's funny. They're really into sports right now. And so my 7-year-old is obsessed with Messi.
Okay.
And, you know, in soccer. And so he wears like a different soccer jersey every day. I'm like, where are you getting these soccer jerseys from? His mom keeps buying him soccer jerseys. And then my 10-year-old Booker, he's really into like gaming online with his friends.
Okay.
And so, his football teammates and whatnot, they like play Fortnite together and all of that stuff. And Fortnite isn't as crazy as it used to be.
But
so
it was,
It was crazy, yeah. But I watch what they do.
I have a 18-year-old and a 22-year-old, and back in the day, Halloween was like their favorite because that was the time that I was able to buy every single superhero costume, and they just would jump around, running around the house, attacking each other. So that's why I asked. But then they graduated into that Fortnite and video gaming and all that other stuff.
It's also cool because their Uncle Malik plays online too, so they have like a babysitter online.
Yeah, they got the headsets on. They're talking trash to Uncle Malik.
Yeah.
What best statement describes your parents' views growing up? You guys better be good, otherwise Santa Claus is not coming. B, no such thing as Santa. He's not getting credit for all my hard-earned money. We bought them gifts. C, Jesus is the reason for this season. Church, church, church.
So, like I said in my intro, like I grew up homeless in the city, right? So my attitude towards Santa was really more like Riley from the Boondocks, in the city.
Oh, okay.
Like, you gonna pay what you owe, Santa. Like, we was just always, Christmas was never like a time of joy in our house. It was like a time to remember that, you really, but here's the thing though, like I ain't trying to get sad or nothing because as you know, when you grow up in those kind of situations, you're not the only one in that situation. And there's people on your block and in your neighborhood, and it's still a fun time. It's just different, right? Like, I didn't get a Nintendo for Christmas. I got like pencils and a rake, so because I had to do work around the house, which was fine. But I was the kid that always ruined Santa for everybody else because I was like, ain't no such thing as Santa Claus. Right?
Boo. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable. I appreciate it. Next to Mr. Terrell is MNJRC's Research Director, Katie Remington Cunningham. Dr. Katie Remington Cunningham is a community-based researcher who's worked in areas of the criminal legal system, youth development, and education. In her position at MNJRC, Remington Cunningham leads the organization in participatory and collaborative community-led research, along with projects and evaluations in partner organizations. As a researcher, RC is invested in community. She is focused on rigorous scholarship and has an unyielding commitment to equity, inclusion, and justice, assuring that her work has impact. RC holds a PhD in education with a focus on developmental psychology from Stanford University and a master's in secondary education from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me a little bit about yourself that I just did not speak on.
So I am not from here. I am a transplant, although I grew up in Wisconsin, in Madison. And so for a long time when I lived away from the Midwest, I was like Minnesota, Wisconsin, like same thing, I'm basically from here. And then moving to Minneapolis, I was like, oh no.
No, not the same thing.
Not at all. So grew up in the Midwest in Wisconsin, but have really lived all over. In fact, moved to Minneapolis in 2020, the summer of 2020. And it is now 2025. So this is the longest I've lived anywhere since I was a child. So kind of all over the place. I went to college on the East Coast and was a teacher in St. Louis. And really, I would say like my whole sort of adult career and life, I've always thought of myself as an educator, but that's looked a lot of different ways. And so then went out to the Bay Area for graduate school and lived in Oakland for about 7 years before coming back here. So we are settled here, I think, hopefully. And I live with my husband and 3 daughters.
Oh my goodness, 3
home,
girls
so.
in the house. Ooh,
So.
opposite of what you got.
It's a lot, but it's great. We love it so much. My daughter B's almost 7. We're all Libras, except for, let's see, Cora just turned 4. So she's a Virgo, very much so. And then we all have October birthdays. So I have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an almost 1-year-old.
Oh my goodness. Do you guys do that whole thing where like you just have one big dinner?
Birthday month. It's just October is birthday month. Yeah, we go all out.
Wow.
I mean, our birthdays, my husband and I both have birthdays in October, are completely lost in the mix. So
oh my
we
goodness.
no longer
so everybody
have
in the
birthdays.
house has October birthdays?
Except for, so my middle child, Cora's the end of September, the 23rd, and then
Okay.
Simone's early November. So
Okay. Girl.
I know.
See, I'm opposite of that. I'm just like you, Justin. I had the 2 boys and then the husband, and then we had a male dog, so I was the only girl in the house. And I kind of like that. I like that, but now we've got Bezos, so she's walking around. Which statement best describes you, Katie? A, I absolutely love the snow. I love outdoor winter sports. I love sweaters and boots. I love all the white dusted trees. Or B, it's snowing outside. I think I'll light a fire in the fireplace and work from home today because I don't want to leave the crib.
So my heart is definitely the former, but my body is definitely the latter. So I do love the concept of winter and snow and cold, and I think it's so magical, and I love, especially since moving to Minnesota, I've been okay, we have to learn how to hockey skate or whatever. But I'm so cold all the time. So I'm sort of miserable outside. So I would say especially with kids, it's we gotta get out. We gotta get out every day. So we do it. But I'm sort of faking how joyful I am. Mostly I'm just really cold.
You're miserable?
Yes, I'm just miserable. And I want that fire. And it always ends with back inside to the fire and the hot cocoa and the extra warm socks. So both.
Yeah. Do you celebrate Christmas?
I do.
I got a Christmas question for you. Cozy Christmas Eve celebration. Let's put on our ugly sweaters, eat and open gifts, or traditional chaotic Christmas morning. Let's open up these gifts and have a healthy brunch and sloth around in PJs until 1 p.m.
I mean, kind of both.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of both. Different points in my life, different years, different. As Justin said, I feel I love the holidays same because of family. That is, what we do. And I've got a big family as well. And so it really depends on who's in the space, whether it's cozy and quiet and we've got our sweaters on, or whether it's chaotic. Usually a little bit of both.
Yeah, we do both in our house too. We also do Hanukkah. So my boys, they don't really do anything, but they show up for the gifts. Yep. But yeah, we do. We do the Christmas Eve, and then we do the Christmas brunch and just lay around all day. I've kind of gotten to the space, or this place, in my life where it's I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, no.
I spent too many years running around with babies because all the family wants you to come over when the babies are little. I'm not doing that anymore. I pay too much in my mortgage to be running around. So let's jump into these questions. Give us a little bit more detail. What is MNJRC? And either one of you can take this.
You want to start?
Yeah, I'll take the easy question. Since it's my job to advance the mission. So the Minnesota Justice Research Center is a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to transform the criminal legal system. And we utilize research, education, and policy development to do that. What that looks like is really the research. We like to dig into an issue and do our homework is kind of how I refer to it. So that, not that we're trying to become experts on any particular issue in justice, but there's a lot to learn, and we like to learn it. And so through education, we try to bring people together across differences. We're actually really good at working with, activists who are abolitionists, but we're also really good at working with law enforcement who actually care about the community, or Republicans, Democrats, whatever. We tend to do a really good job of bringing people together across differences to learn together. And then we design policies, develop policies that help move the system towards being more fair, equitable, accountable, and restorative whenever possible. So under our research, which Katie can talk about, Dr. Cunningham can talk about a little bit more, is just that, we also do program evaluations, which is also how we learn a lot.
Okay.
And our whole focus is just how do we dig in, bring people together, and develop solutions that people can advocate for.
And why is this kind of work so important?
There's a lot of different ways to answer that question. I'll use the Minnesota answer. So it's no surprise to folks, Minnesota was the source of a global racial uprising, right? And some people refer to it as the reckoning. I think we skipped the reckoning part, and people just got really desperate to get back to normal. But we had to confront some ugly stuff came out in that experience, and the reason why we should care about it is because for a lot of things. So our systems to administer justice in our society need to be trustworthy and humane and effective. And you can't say that about our criminal legal system today. Mm-hmm. And when the criminal legal system doesn't function as it ought to serve the people and provide a adequate and effective intervention when people cause harm or commit crimes, well then, in a sense, it's facilitating the next harm and the next crime. Mm-hmm. So as someone is the victim of gun violence and they lose a loved one, if they don't believe the system is going to intervene and create a pathway to justice for the and hold the person accountable who shot your loved one, well, then it is actually reasonable for you to think maybe I should take that course of action myself. Mm-hmm. And so we need an effective criminal justice system that actually provides effective, humane, trustworthy interventions so that people believe that we can rely on a system to administer justice so that we don't have to seek mob justice or community violence as a response to the absence of an effective system. And so I'll just close by saying this is just that this is important to me because I actually think Minnesota is responsible for making sure our country has a model that other states can follow. We should have the best criminal justice system in the country. We should be clear about how we want officers to interact with our communities. We should be clear about how we want pretrial and bail, those pretrial processes to operate. We should be really clear about our court systems and how we administer justice and sentencing. And if we're going to suspend someone's liberties and incarcerate them, we should do that in the most humane way possible, which our current structure is. Our current structure is based on archaic, ancient ideas of punishment, Foucault type stuff, right? And then finally, when people return to society, we should be prepared to welcome them back, and we should give them a job to do to repair the harm that they potentially cause. And so we have a big mission, a big goal of advancing and creating a criminal justice system we can actually call just, and we need everybody to help us do that. And so we're a small team. We're passionate about this work. We're excited. I'm always excited to talk about it. So thank you. But yeah, we need everybody in this fight.
An effective justice system is part of our preventative measures.
Absolutely.
Katie, do you want to jump in? Or?
Yeah, I'll just add, I think one of the things, when I hear your question, why is this kind of work so important? I think about the kind of work that we do too, right? In addition to sort of like what we want, how we do it. And I think our approach is imperfect, and we're definitely, building this plane as we fly it, but we care really deeply about change, right? If we're trying to seek system transformation, we have to actually see change happen. And we know it can be slow, and we know sometimes, it can be small, but we have to have that larger goal. And in order to do that, as Justin mentioned, sort of like with our research or the tools that we have to actually be really thoughtful about the problem, right? I think sometimes when we are trying to seek change, we skip a deep analysis of the problem, which is why I love research. And I think also sometimes we have seen, research can be a very powerful tool for change and to convince people or to shift practice or culture or policy. But often that tool, when we think of traditional research, and I know we're on a podcast, but I'm using air quotes, research, right? Like that is very, very stale. It's usually quantitative. It's usually numbers. And it's usually done by folks who are really disconnected from the issue. And so why I think our kind of work is really important is because all of our research and education and policy work is really centered around communities closest to the issue. And I say communities, plural, because there's no, monolithic community, but like folks closest to the issue, we deeply believe that we should send our people most impacted by issues. So often that when we talk about our legal system, It's not quite a criminal justice system yet, but those are folks who are, incarcerated or arrested, or oftentimes family members or loved ones, people who have, been harmed by others or by the system. But also another community of folks are those people working in the system. And so if we really want to understand, for example, how and why cash bail works or doesn't work, it actually means you have to, in our opinion, start with people who maybe have been incarcerated, and then also talk to judges, prosecutors, public defenders, even like pretrial services administrators, right? Like folks who are sometimes doing the work on the ground in sometimes like some boring administrative ways, but they have a lot of power and they have actually a lot of ideas about change. Like so many people we talk to are actually really frustrated with status quo, but there's not a lot of creativity or excitement on how to shift that. And so we start with those, we start by opening up that opportunity to shift the status quo through our research. We ask these kind of provocative questions. We dig in, we figure out like, what are the right questions? We talk to community members and system actors and everyone in between to figure out if we're asking the right questions. We pivot, we turn, but then we sort of open that space to actually imagine something different. And in many ways, if we're successful, and we have been in some instances for sure, we are able to then sort of like fill that space with a transformed system, either in a small way or ideally, hopefully someday, a large way.
You actually answered my question, because my next question was, how does your research help guide public safety efforts and policies in Minnesota? So I'm going to ask you the second half of that question, which is, what are some of the things you walk away with after a hard day of serving others when doing your research?
That's a good question. Some of the things I walk away with after a hard day. It's funny. I don't exactly think of myself as serving others.
Okay.
But maybe that's just nuanced. I think of myself and our organization as really contributing. Like, I think we are deeply collaborative. We're contributing to, important efforts happening all over. And I think that service, when I think of service, it sort of like brings up, and Justin and I talk a lot about this, right? It brings up these sort of like notions of, kind of help. And like when you serve and when you help, like those things are really important. But for us to actually transform systems, we can't just sort of serve and help. As I said, we have to actually like kind of dig in and pull apart and tease apart. And sometimes, with research, when you ask hard questions, sometimes you get the answer that you didn't really want, or that you're not quite sure how to make sense of. And so I think what I feel at the end of a hard day is I feel a lot of hope. And that's another like word that we sort of grapple with and concept that we've been thinking a lot about. But I do feel a lot of hope that people come to the table when you open up a space for them to bring their lived experience, like the thing that they know, to a conversation to try to then work together toward issues, right? So I more see ourselves as like setting up, asking questions, setting up these containers in really thoughtful and strategic ways so that people don't have to be experts on bail or policing or community supervision, or right. Like, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a criminologist, I'm an educator. And so I don't have a legal background. And I think when we come to spaces with our lived experience, I have experience with the criminal legal system. We all do in some ways, if we just like open up, sort of our minds to how it's impacted us. We're able to share what we know, our embodied experience, and then we can take one step closer to thinking about creative ideas about how we might do better. So kind of a long-winded answer to like, how do I feel at the end of a hard day serving others? I do feel a sense of hope, because I think that the way we do this work, we see examples of it every day, that people show up and then keep showing up and engage in this conversation, because it's really, really collaborative, participatory. It requires all of us, right? Like, that's how Justin ended, which is just like, we can't just move this thing on our own. Like, we have to actually show up and all step in our own way, if that makes sense.
Justin, so you have spent time on the CMAH and you served on the Ujamaa board. That is a line of service. Do you compare what you do now? Do you see it as service with working with the Minnesota Justice Research Center? growling. Sorry. She's like, sorry. Can
She's
you
so
edit that
cute.
out?
That's the
She's
cutest
she's
dog.
like, oh, how
sleeping on
long
the
do I have
table.
to sit here?
I love her. I love her.
Puppy disclaimer.
Sorry, you guys. I just want to put a disclaimer out that I am accompanied not only by Justin, my engineer, Anton, and Katie, but I also have Bezos sitting on my lap. So if you hear any growls or grumbles or barks or any of those things in the background, that is what you are hearing. So, Justin, tell me what you think about service.
Okay, so it's interesting because I agree with Dr. Cunningham. Like, we don't really consider our work like service providing, right? So, but when a client hires us to do an evaluation of their program, that is a service that we are providing. But even when we do that, we're thinking about what can we learn and what can we help the community learn through this experience. But in my previous role, as the executive director of the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage, or CEMA for short, the service I was providing there was to be, it was a representative body of different parts of the African American and African immigrant communities. And the service we were providing was advising the governor and the legislature to make sure that the decisions that they were making, that there were some Black folks in the mix, no matter what. And we would bring people together from all over the state, right? And so that was the service we were providing, was like an on-ramp to the legislature and the governor's office. At Ujamaa, I've never worked at Ujamaa, but I've served on the board and have been a longtime supporter. I was literally there yesterday, right? Ujamaa does provide a service, but once again, I would challenge this idea of like help and serving, right?
Okay.
What I think about is, as a Black man, right, and I look at our community, we often talk about historical trauma. And there is no way to heal that trauma through service, acts of service.
Okay.
We do acts of service all the time. People look out for each other all the time in our community. It's a narrative that doesn't get elevated enough. And Daniel Sered talks about how the opposite of trauma is not healing, that the opposite of trauma is agency. And so rather as a community organizer or serving on the board of Ujamaa, whatever role I played in the last, 15 years or so, I have tried to focus on how do I help my community build agency?
Okay.
How do I help us develop the ability to act in our own interest? And specifically when it comes to the criminal legal system, come on now. Like, the state is 80% white and 40% of the prison population is BIPOC. Right, 35% I believe is Black, and actually I think my numbers are low that I'm saying off the top of my head right now.
Yeah,
and so that doesn't happen by accident, and it's not going to unhappen by accident. You're not going to be able to provide quality probation services to fix that problem. In order to fix that problem, communities have to develop power or agency to act in their own self-interest to make sure that that system goes from targeting our communities to serving our communities. And so my interest isn't the service that I provide or that our organization provides. My interest is making sure the service the criminal legal system provides is one that is effective for our community. And in order to get there, we have to do our homework. One of the funniest things about the research, I'll just say, is my favorite experience is when we complete a report and I go to the barbershop and I'm like, hey, did y'all see this report we just put up on our website? I'm like, check it out. And they'll be like, yeah, I read that. And I'm like, okay, cool. What'd you think? Man, we already knew that. We already knew what was in that report. And they go on and on, it's just, it's funny. I always just say, I'm like, that means I did my job, because it's not about discovering new information most of the time. It is about affirming our experiences so that there's
that part.
Data to back up what we have experienced in our community, and that we can stand on business now. It's like, it makes it very hard for them, and they will dismiss data and all of that. When folks target our communities, let's be clear about that. Data won't save us. And when we have the data, it is another tool in our toolkit to advocate for our community. And so there's a wide range of things we need. We need data. We need well-resourced organizations. We need policies that reflect our experience and not necessarily just like systems theory, right? And so we need a bunch of tools in the toolkit, and data is one of them. And so whenever people roll their eyes and like, Justin, you're going to tell me your report discovered that there is racism in the Minneapolis Police Department, Like, we known that for like 150 years. You know, I'm like, you can roll your eyes at me. That's cool. But let's see how the system tries to lie about it now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that to me is a fight worth taking on and a story worth telling.
Katie, can you tell our audience a little bit about your partnership with ONS and the work that you've been doing with our office?
Yeah. So we connected with the Office of Neighborhood Safety. Gosh, it's been almost a year and a half, I think, since we first had kind of preliminary conversations. And I think at the time we were sort of in the same space for that. We're building out this thing called Project Peace, and we've got some structure, but you know, talking with Brooke and Faith and Rachel, we know that early on, we want to make sure that we are thoughtful about building a program or an approach to, you know, gun violence intervention, community violence intervention. So what do you think about being an evaluation partner? And we were like, yeah, you know, it's sort of hard to evaluate something that doesn't exist yet, but let's talk. And, you know, so we kind of continue conversations. And to the credit of you all at ONS, like just the movement, the sort of, in some ways, the speed that you've like moved and built both the office and also Project Peace has been so astounding and really thoughtful. And so it was something like 3 or 4 months later, I think Brooke reached out and was like, we actually have a very formal RFP process now. Like, we're doing it. You want to, you know, apply if you want. And we were like, oh gosh, okay. So we went through the formal process and got the contract. And our partnership, I call it as Justin mentioned, we do program evaluation. Most of those sort of program evaluation that we do is a little different than your standard program evaluation where you have like a very clear set of outcomes, or you have a program design that exists and you're like, let's measure, you know, whether or not we're doing those things that we intend to do, right? Like in the criminal legal system, we hear a lot like the one piece of evidence that shows an evidence-based program that is effective is one that reduces recidivism. And you're like, okay, you know, toward what end?
Right,
and for whom? And right, like I have all kinds of questions about that as an outcome, but it's a classic one. In some ways, it's often the only one that programs in this space look at. Like, are we reducing people going back to prison? Like, what a low bar. So when we connect with organizations, our offices doing sort of innovative work, we embark on what we call a developmental evaluation. All that means is it sort of unfolds as we go. So this partnership has really been us sort of acting as your research partners. We get to kind of ask that question, and we get to ask the question over and over again in different ways. Like, what feels like success to you all? Okay, if this feels like success for you all, if you feel like you've made the world a different or better place, you know, in the way that you want to, if you are addressing gun violence, for example, or if you're creating a robust community violence intervention program, what does that look like to you? And then we try to figure out, again, really collaboratively, creative ways to measure that, right? So, you know, that's what research is, right? We ask a question, we're trying to figure something out, and then we go out and we find the evidence of it. We figure out what data is. And so for Project Peace, for ONS, we've really looked at kind of 5 big things, but primarily we're supporting the office and the development of the program. So the sort of sausage making piece, right? Like, how are we building a program like this? And we're doing interviews and lots of observations. As you know, we're showing up, you know, to the Safe Summer Night, and, you know, we get to watch meetings and all that good stuff. We're looking at impact on crime. You know, we have had a lot of conversations about what that means and how to measure that. But it's something that we have heard loud and clear from folks at ONS and system partners that this matters.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a researcher, I'm always thoughtful about sort of looking to measures or outcomes that like won't actually be, you know, very informative, right? I think crime rate is like your classic one where it's sort of like it's most highly associated with ice cream sales. And so like you could say ice cream causes crime, but like it doesn't, right? There's lots of other things happening there. So it's a tough one to sort of tease apart and say like, did Project Peace reduce gun violence? That's a tough question, but there are ways that we can go about it. So we're sort of digging in there. We're looking at the experience for participants, for clients, as you call them, right? And so that's really important to you. It's really important to us. If you are working with young people who are impacted by gun violence, we want to know how they're experiencing you. And it's nice to be this sort of independent evaluator. We found it to be really, because sometimes it's a fun sort of middle person role, right? Where you get to be like, we are not the city of St. Paul and we're not your mom. So like, tell us about this, right? Like, what has your experience actually been? So we're doing interviews. We're really digging into client and participant experiences because that matters for programming. And then finally, sort of an assessment or an exploration of how the community is feeling and experiencing this program. So we did a big survey this summer to try to understand, community members' sort of knowledge of and understanding a project piece. And just feelings around safety, right? So there's broader conversations happening and trying to figure out, is sort of peace or ONS shifting those feelings? Because sometimes feelings are the best measurement of whether or not a place is safe, right? How you feel. You can tell us that crime is down across the country, right? We hear these conversations a lot, especially in our world. But if you don't feel safe, that doesn't matter to me, right? And so we're digging in there too. And that's, this ONS partnership, it's been such an amazing one. And it's really pretty, I would say, sort of representative of how we try to do our work, especially with government partners. We've worked with the city of St. Paul before to really try to be a sort of a resource, but also sort of go alongside you as you're building and doing your work and asking those hard questions. So we'll be continuing that for the next, I think sort of formally our contract's up in next June. So it's like a 2-year project. And so pretty soon here, actually, we're going to pivot to our cave work, as I call it, as researchers, where we've done a lot of data collection. And now we have this sort of
put it together.
Yeah, we got to dig in and, turn out the lights and sit on our computers, right? But we get to really sort of explore and listen to those interviews and try to understand themes and findings and recommendations to support the work you're all doing.
Justin, let's talk about your current projects. So what does MNJRC have going on currently?
So obviously our project Peace Work, which once again I would just co-sign to, just saying that I'm really excited about that project. Selby Jazz Fest is one of my favorite events in the community, and it was interesting to be out there talking to people about the survey this year, and which normally I just go and listen to music.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot more conversations about community safety in that space, and that's because of the opportunity that you guys gave us, and so that leads to other opportunities, right? To help build trust and relationships in the community for the organization. Our largest projects right now have to do with pretrial. So we got an appropriation from the state of Minnesota to study Minnesota's pretrial system. Other folks know it as cash bail.
Okay.
And so we have this great report on our website that you can check out. We actually have 3 reports on?
Yeah, there's a couple reports. There's some also, shorter videos. We have a mini doc that's 11 minutes. That's really cool. That digs into that project. And there's some one-pagers. And there's some good ways to access our findings, I would say.
And if you read our report, we have basically, through a round of traveling across the country, across the state, interviewing systems actors, interviewing people who've slept in jail or paid bail. We put together a recommendation for a system that we believe could absolutely replace the cash bail system in Minnesota.
Okay.
And so folks should check that out. And if you co-sign and you believe in what we're talking about, you should help support that effort at the Capitol, as there's a data bill that's been introduced right now. Another body of work that we're working on, that we've been working on for a couple of years now, is probation and community supervision. Okay. So we were helpful in working on a policy that redesigned the clemency process at the state, which I'm very excited about. As you had formerly incarcerated people working on that, and now, we went from having maybe 1 or 2 pardons a year to now every time you go, the room is packed and there's all these folks there advocating to get their records dealt with. And Jason Soul is right now fighting for his, and I'll just poke a little bit of fun at Jason, based, if you know his record of leadership, he'll absolutely get one, right? Mm-hmm. And so we want people to continue to do that. But also in our work with formerly incarcerated folks, we helped to advocate for the closure of Stillwater Prison this year, the oldest prison facility in the state. We brought together some researchers to talk about it. We talked about community, did some education, and there wasn't a bill or anything to advocate for, but there was enough support for the idea that the governor and the commissioner were able to make that decision. And then, coming back to the table to make sure that as they decommission that facility, that there's formerly incarcerated people involved in that process to ensure that there's a humane process. And that may not be all in the news and whatnot, but the reality is that's the kind of work that we're dedicated to, is making sure people impacted are part of that kind of process.
Okay.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention one more topic, and there's a bunch of issues that we're working on. But
you guys are everywhere. I've heard of all these things. I just didn't know that you were either advocating for them or behind it or push
And let me be clear, like, you know, we don't do this work alone. Like, if it sounds like I'm taking credit for all of this stuff, I hope that's not how it sounds.
No.
We're
But
really
you're in
clear
it.
about our contributions. We have specific contributions to these fights. And so the last one is a body of work around policing.
Okay.
And so, you know, we helped design the consent decree in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And we are working on our conference this year is going to be focused on law enforcement entirely. And so we'll be talking about the consent decree. We'll be talking about BCR, the Behavior Crisis Response Unit, and innovative ways for community to be involved in responding to calls that don't require a gun and a badge. The Behavioral Crisis Unit in Minneapolis is wildly popular. I've yet to meet somebody that doesn't like it. And it's just this idea when you call 911, they can send, and this is due to Trevor's law that was passed at the state capitol a few years ago. When you call 911, you can send a mental health professional instead of someone with a gun and a badge. And we're evaluating that program as well right now. And we have, like I said, we have yet to run into somebody that has like deep concerns, even though we do have recommendations to improve it. And then we're also going to talk at our conference about the clearance rate in Minneapolis. And so in St. Paul, in the Twin Cities, you know, one thing that most people can agree on is that we want law enforcement to be really good at solving crimes. Mm-hmm. You know, as somebody who's lost loved ones to community violence, like, I wanted that homicide detective to be on his job, like some straight up law and order type stuff, right? It doesn't matter when you're the victim of community violence, you want solutions. You want to resolve that moment, that issue. And so we want cops to be really good at solving crimes. And we're going to have a conversation about how to increase clearance rates in Minneapolis specifically. And then the last conversation we're going to have, and there's a blog post on our website, you can check out our most recent blog post, is around, I don't even know how to describe this. So I've been a part of this project called the Police and Black Men Project for the last 8 years. And so what that has been an ongoing conversation with police officers in the 4th Precinct in Minneapolis and Black men from the community, not like academic brothers and whatnot, you know, but like neighborhood cats, like sitting down with the police once a month to talk about the issues of the day. And we've been doing this for 8 years. So that means we're talking Jamar Clark, we're talking Philando Castile, we're talking about all these incidents that happened. We were at the table discussing them as they happened, challenging law enforcement, and sometimes law enforcement challenging us. And that's been a long, I don't know how to, tense conversation
Go ahead
at times.
And speak. Yep.
Yeah, you know, like I'm talking about knockdown, drag out, screaming arguments we've had in that space. Yep. And through that tension, we've built just a tremendous amount of trust and respect for one another. Now we take the officers, and when I say we, I mean the community. We pay for these trips to take officers down to Montgomery and talk about race at the Legacy Museum led by EJI. And so a few months ago, we led a restorative justice circle in North Minneapolis, and 75 people came out, and people walked out of there after being able to sit down next to an officer and ask the difficult questions, and nobody got mad. Nobody threw a chair. And nobody got and no one like bought into propaganda either, right? Like,
I got goosebumps.
Well, hey, I'm doing my job. And so at our conference this year, we're going to have that conversation at the conference as well, which it's really, and I'll just say this about policing work, it's really difficult because we never want to be in a position where we are unreasonably critical of law enforcement, and we don't want to be in a position where we're like an arm of propaganda for law enforcement. And so we are constantly trying to thread this needle of integrity. So we are constantly questioned by law enforcement, like, what are you guys up to? And they don't trust us because they look at our website and they see the consent decree report on there or whatever. And the community's like, what are y'all up to? Because they're like, you sitting down with Justin, I see you walking into the 4th Precinct the other day, right? Like that. Back in the day, that would have been a highly problematic situation, right? And so
you would have came out to no tires.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's this really difficult thing that we're trying to do, this really complicated conversation we're trying to lead, because we simply believe, frankly, St. Paul does not have the reputation that MPD has, but we need a Minneapolis model for public safety that is, in my opinion, the only appropriate response to the uprising. Is that we can say as a city and as a Twin Cities and as a state, we came together after what we rightfully, outrageously refused to accept a black man murdered in front of children and our elders and colleagues who begged those officers to stop what they were doing. Now, you can say whatever you want to say about George Floyd, but the reality is our community was there, witnessed it, and asked them to change their behavior, and they did not, and that man died. And so the only response to that is for law enforcement to change their behavior and to listen to community, which also means community has to move into proximity with law enforcement. And I'm willing, anyone can challenge me on this theory of change. Like Katie said, we are building this plane as we're trying to fly it. And we have seen powerful results from these efforts. But man, when I tell you this is not an easy conversation to try to lead, just keeping it 100.
I know. Last question, and thank you for that. What are your goals for the City of St. Paul's Office of Neighborhood Safety? Katie, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. I think especially, thinking about the work that we've done, over the last year and a half and that we're, still doing, of course. I think a big goal for the Office of Neighborhood Safety in particular is for not just for Project Peace, but for all of that, various efforts that you all are working on to really continue to ground them in the sort of initial values. So what I mean by that is, again, a couple of years ago when we started having this conversation, the Office of Neighborhood Safety, really the sort of prevention, PEACE is my favorite acronym ever. Do you know what it stands for? It's 17 things. In Project Peace, it's prevention and intervention, education, and it's actually not peace. It's PIE. Anyway, I love it. But it's everything, right? And it's this idea, which is, it's complicated, but I love that the initiative with the Office of Neighborhood Safety was actually to really be deeply holistic. And so, we're seeing challenges, we're digging into challenges, but my goal really, one of the big goals I would have for ONS is to really stay true to that sort of holistic approach, because I think that has to be how an Office of Neighborhood Safety operates, right? Neighborhood safety is so many things. And you're a government system. And so there are going to be spaces where when you think about these, this sort of holistic and wraparound approach, you have to make deep collaborations and connections to folks who can do it better positioned or have better, have a lot of experience or backgrounds or whatever. And so I'm seeing that happen. And I think continuing to just hold that grounding of that holistic approach and to not, and we'll support that process, obviously, in trying to figure out all the pieces. And it might mean, you put this thing down today to build these for the next couple of years and you pick it back up, right? How that actually unfolds. But I think keeping that center, and I'm thinking about Minneapolis potentially as a comparison, right? But keeping that North Star, maybe to use an overused Minnesota term, but that is really unique about ONS, the commitment to the holistic approach. So, that would be one goal that would come up for me.
Yeah, I think to us, we're very much able to connect to community and community organizations for that holistic approach. But it's just being part of government and needing to educate them or convince them that this is the right approach, and then having that system within government built around our approach when government is used to doing things differently.
Wouldn't it be nice if you had some data or sort of a report to show how that might be possible?
Right. Justin, what are your goals for St. Paul?
That's pretty much it. I want to see the community get a service that they, everyone I've talked to about Project Peace is I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds like a really good idea. And so I just want to help the community and the city get on the same page about what seems to be a really good idea. And I'm thankful that Katie's digging in and she's got a great team working on this project. And I think it's just a good conversation to have, and we're heading in the right direction.
Thank you guys so much. St. Paul citizens are out here working hard to rehabilitate, intervene, and rebuild safer neighborhoods. Again, this podcast is about being able to connect you with alternative public safety matters, programs, and your local growth and healing opportunities. If you'd like to learn more about Minnesota Justice Research Center, please visit www.mnjrc.org. And for more information about Office of Neighborhood Safety, check us out at stpaul.gov/ONS.